Let's have our first order come up. It's for the State Senator, 34 Legislative District. We've got Frank Hill, our incumbent, and Scott Smith. Would you please come up and sit right here? The legislative process and the running in these races, it's good to have competition, and we appreciate those that are willing to step forward and to run for these races. It takes a lot of work, and certainly the pay is not usually worth the time that you put into it, but it's a good thing to do because we need good people in these races, and we appreciate those of you who do stick your name in the hat and run. We appreciate all the work that you do. Okay, so why don't we start off? We'll kind of do this differently, not always the same, but this time we're going to ask Senator Hill if he'll just kind of introduce himself, and you get 2 minutes to talk about yourself.
Well, thanks. I'll use part of my 2 minutes on behalf of all of us again to thank the Republican Central Committee for sponsoring this, and of course for all of you for being here. It's been a great experience to serve in the Idaho State Legislature. I'm grateful for the voters for trusting me to do that over the past. As far as background, I grew up in Sugar City in Rexburg. When I was 14 years old, I moved from Sugar City to Rexburg. I realized that's only 4 miles, but when you're a shy kid having to change high schools, it could have been 4,000 miles. It was a hard thing for me to do, but I appreciated being over here. Graduated from Madison High School, went to Ricks College, and got my accounting degree from Utah State University. My wife, Julie, my wife is here. Julie, do you want to raise your hand? We've been married for almost 42 years. We raised 4 sons, and we have 18 grandchildren. I tried to kind of summarize the qualifications in the time period and into maybe 3 categories. One is I have the time. We're at a point in our lives, our children are all gone. I retired from my accounting practice about 3 years ago, and so I have the time to serve in this capacity. Secondly, I have the experience. I was a CPA, I still am a CPA, but I practiced for almost 40 years, 35 years here in Rexburg at Rudd & Company down the street here, and for 20 of those years I was the president and CEO of our 6 offices. In the legislature, I served on the Finance Committee for 4 years. I served as chairman of the Local Government and Taxation Committee for 4 years, and then I served as the president of the Senate for the last, or leader of the Senate for the last 4 years. And lastly, I have a desire to serve. I appreciate your support.
All right. Thank you. Okay, we'd like to hear from the challengers. Scott Smith.
The dreaded moment. What can I say about myself? I don't like to talk about myself very much. I consider myself a Rexburger. I lived here for the better part of 34 years. My dad moved us here in 1980 and started teaching chemistry at Ricks College. I served a mission in the Philippines, and then we spent a little bit of time up north after my wife and I got married. We have 4 daughters, 3 of whom are here. As for why I'm running, my opponent has been running pretty well unchallenged for 13 years, and I think it's only right that the voters of Madison County have a choice. And I'd also like to make a good, strong pull for state sovereignty, for lighter budgets, and smaller government at the state level. And unless I have to use up my full 2 minutes, that's all I've got to say.
Thank you. All right, let's get into some questions. First one is, and we'll ask Senator Hill to go first. What do you believe will be the main issue or issues in the Idaho 2015 legislative session in the Senate, and how will you vote?
And what?
And how would you vote? Pretty open.
Pretty open, okay. Well, I think there's a number of things. Family's number one, and we need to continue to protect the family. But also education is very important. The governor's task force put together 20 recommendations for excellence in education. And they received pretty much unanimous support, very close to unanimous support. They come with a price tag. They include a career ladder for teachers. They include technology, a number of things. That's going to take a period of 5-6 years to phase that in and to pay for that. And I think that's going to be something you'll see as we flesh that out, try to determine how to implement those things. Another thing that doesn't get a lot of publicity, but we had a study done by the Council on State Governments this last year, and they talked about how to revamp our prison system as well as our parole system and our whole justice system, and I think you'll see us working on that as well.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Smith, what do you believe will be the main issue or issues in the Idaho 2015 legislative session in the Senate, and how do you believe you would vote?
That is a good question. It has two different sides to it. One is what I think will be what I'd like to have be the main issue for 2015, or main set of issues, and what actually will be. I echo the issues of my opponent here. Family is an important thing. And I think as long as we're protecting the family, then I can support that. Education is going to be another important matter. I've read through the task list, and I can't say that I fully support all of them. There are several top-down, one-size-fits-all plans included in that task force list, and quite honestly, until I get there, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I will review each and every issue as it comes up.
All right, thank you. Okay, let's reverse here. Let's, Mr. Smith, knowing what we know now, how would you vote if there was a bill to repeal the state health care exchange in 2015?
That one's easy. I'd support that in a heartbeat.
Okay.
Same question?
Yes.
That's an easy one for me, too. I don't know a single Republican in the Idaho legislature that supported or wants the Affordable Care Act. We were one of the first states to file suits against the federal government on the Affordable Care Act. What the courts came down with was two choices: an exchange that was ruled by the federal government, or one that was taken care of by state people. I voted to have a state-based, a state-run exchange. I think that was the wise thing. We're doing it for less money, less than half of what the federal government is charging our citizens. We're doing it more efficiently with less technical problems. We don't have to have personal information in order to go into the exchange like the federal government's requiring just to get a quote or just to find out how much it's going to cost. We passed legislation to prohibit abortion services on any premiums or any policies that are offered through the exchange. These are important things we need to keep at the state level, not advocate to the federal government.
Mr. Smith, do you have a rebuttal on that, or any comments?
Well, I would like to say that this is where one of my chief differences with Senator Hill. He settled with what the court has to say. I believe that there's another alternative. I think that states have the power, they have the authority to reject unconstitutional federal law. The court upheld the Affordable Care Act, but that doesn't mean that we have to accept the court's ruling. We have, as a state, the authority and power from the 10th Amendment to reject such laws. If they don't work in Idaho, we shouldn't have to implement them. And so I'm opposed to the exchange. Now, if it had come along outside of the pressure of the Affordable Care Act, I might have a different opinion. But because it seems to be tied to the hip to the Affordable Care Act, I'm opposed to it.
Thank you. Okay, Senator Hill, what legislation would you like to see passed in the next few years?
Well, that kind of goes along with the first question, what I think the priorities are. We need to take care of our public education, our home schoolers and others, to make sure we're getting the proper kind of education. A lot of the problems that we have in the state, our poverty, our problems within our prisons and so forth, come from a lack of education, along with the attacks that are going on against the home and the family. And so I think education, trying to not only fund it properly, but to provide guidance at the state level, but making sure that we have local control with our local school districts, our local schools, and our local teachers. And I think also the governor has been very good over the last few years. Even during the recession, we have been able to reduce our tax liabilities, our tax burden on the citizens. We've reduced the income tax rates, we've reduced personal property tax on businesses. I'd like to see that continue in the future.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Smith, what legislation would you like to see passed in the next few years?
Oh, I'd like to see a lot of regulation removed. I'd like to see what I'd really like to see at the top of my list is a legislative move to have the 16th and 17th Amendments to the United States Constitution repealed, giving back states their representation in Congress, and giving back liberty. We need principles of liberty here in Idaho. We feel like we're free, but we're not. We're way too regulated. And I would move to reduce regulation and to make business a lot easier here in Idaho.
Doug?
Thank you.
I can respond to that.
Okay.
I agree with Scott on that. We need to be careful with regulation, particularly business regulation. We are one of the few states in the union that has the legislative power to review every rule that is made by the administrative side of government, by all of the agencies. We review those. We can reject any rule, each legislative session that has been promulgated during that year. That's a wonderful power that we have at the legislative level of government in Idaho. And we are trying to make that permanent, and so the courts can't take that away with a constitutional amendment, which you folks will be voting on this November, to make sure the legislature keeps that power, to be able to do just exactly what Scott and I have said need to be done.
Thank you. We have a question that was written here just as we're getting started, and we'll ask Mr. Smith this. Have you read all of the Idaho state statutes recently?
Right.
All of the state statutes, no. They're voluminous, and James Madison said that when laws become so voluminous that basically the layperson can't read them and can't understand them, then they become futile and pointless.
I've probably read a great many of them over the last 12 years that I've been in the legislature, because we've amended a great many of them, and we've made changes over the years and so forth. One thing I do before every session, and I do it throughout the year, but before every session I sit down and I read the Constitution of the United States and the Idaho State Constitution, so that we can be reminded of what governs all of those laws. Regardless, it all comes back to those two constitutions, which we raise our hand to object.
Thank you. Okay, I have another question here. This one has Senator Hill's name on it for the question, so we'll ask you, and then we'll ask Mr. Smith as well to respond. All right. I assume you believe in moral agency. How does your support of the health exchange with Obamacare mandates, as well as the expansion of Medicare support and maintain moral agency, the right to choose?
Well, we're back to the exchange. Let me make sure everybody understands. We're now a year later. A year ago, every state had to determine whether to set up a state-run exchange or to allow the federal government to come in and take that over for that state. Every state, all 50 states, whether they tried to defy that, whether they tried to nullify that, whether they tried to ignore that, every single one of them now has an exchange, either run by the state, by state people within the state, solving our problems and making it unique to our citizens, or run by the federal government. The facilitators that help people go onto that, those are all Idaho citizens within the state of Idaho. In some of these other states, the federal government is actually contracted with Planned Parenthood, with ex-executives from Acorn, to monitor this and to work with people and set that up. We have control over that. We've got to keep that morally.
Thank you. Mr. Smith.
Well, I agree that we have to keep control of Idaho and what's in Idaho. I think the better way to do that is to insulate the citizens of Idaho from punishment, from taxation, from the national government because of the Affordable Care Act. We do that, and then, well, let me put it this way. I am an uninsured man. I do not have health insurance. I'm not going to get health insurance. It's too expensive for me. It's more expensive for me now than it was before the Affordable Care Act went into play. And so people like me need to be protected by our state government, not thrown to the wolves of the IRS because we can't afford health insurance.
Thank you. All right. We appreciate your responses. That's all the questions we have for you. You're off the hook. And thank you very much, both of you, for taking time and answering questions. Okay, our next